Okay, so this is going to be a video on the tegu cage. I've been getting quite a few questions just about the cage in general, and was asked to make a video about it, and so here we are. I'm going to try to explain some things that people had questions on, and trying to just go over how I did everything, and hopefully it'll answer any questions that people have had about the cage. So the cage itself was made in 6 parts. I built the 6 parts outside, and I brought them inside. The 6 parts are the two. You can't see all of them, but I have 2 side panels, one right here, and one on the other side. And then I have the top panel, and the bottom panel, and the back and the front. So yeah, I made each piece outside. That's made out of plywood and 2x4s. Then I painted it and did everything outside. Then I brought each piece individually in here and actually put the whole thing together inside, because otherwise it just wasn't going to fit through that door. The cage itself is 8 feet long, 4 feet deep, and 4 feet tall, which is pretty standard size for tegu cages. The minimum for females is 6x3, and the minimum for males is 8x4. The minimum for females is 6x3 because females are supposed to get no bigger than about 3 feet. But my female is 40 inches, so obviously she's bigger than 3 feet. And she's actually hiding right now. And so yeah, that's kind of why I went with 8x4, plus I had the space. But if your female tops out at about 3 feet, then I see no reason why you couldn't keep in a 6x3 enclosure. It'd be no difference than keeping an adult male who gets every bit of 4 feet in an 8x4 enclosure. Okay, so how I built it, as far as the top and bottom pieces, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but you can see I have like the plywood kind of creating like the skeleton, and then I have, the 2x4s creating the skeleton, and I have these braces right here, and those help with extra support, and I just use screws to screw those in. And then I screwed plywood on top of it to create the actual roof. And the bottom panel looks exactly the same as this, except it has 3 support beams. Now most people just use 2, but I wanted this to be extra sturdy because I knew I'd be putting things on top of it like my leopard gecko cage. But most people just use one little support beam in the middle, and they'll use 2 for the bottom because the bottom usually has to hold a ton of substrate. The back panel is just the back panel. It's just a big piece of plywood. There's nothing really too special about it. It's got 2x4s on the side here, like for the door. It has a 2x4 here and 2x4s on the other side. You can't see them, but that's the way it looks from the outside. I don't know if you can see it, like right here, the 2x4s, and you can see it's kind of like the plywood kind of creates the enclosure. And then, yeah, and then it's just the big back panel. That was pretty simple to make. And then the side panels are just plywood pieces I had cut, and I screwed those into place. And then the door was the hardest part. Now, as far as the door is concerned, I actually made this frame outside. The glass came later. The glass, you can see the top part has the tracks, and it goes all the way down, and the bottom part has the tracks. These top tracks are actually part of the roof of the enclosure, and basically what I do is, as I put sliding glass, I had to lift the roof up a little bit and put sliding glass there in order to get the door in place. The door is going to be your most expensive part. Basically, you have 2 options. You can use hinges, which is a little more complex, or you can use sliding glass. I decided to use sliding glass. I was going to use hinges, but I just didn't have the tools to do it, so I used sliding glass, and it works just fine. Let's see what else. Your door is going to be your most expensive part. I probably spent about, as far as the enclosure is concerned, about 1/3 of the cost came from the door alone. The glass was like $100 and something. So the door's going to cost you a lot. Otherwise, everything else, not as expensive. The wood I had made at Home Depot, and they had it all pre-cut and everything. Everything was pre-cut there, and I just took it home and made it and put it together. You have to coat the wood with something in order to make it watertight. So to make it watertight, I use something called Kills Primer. I don't have it with me right now, but it's spelled Kilz Primer, and it's made for masonry. It's like used for concrete and stuff, but it's highly recommended for tegu enclosures on several forums, and because it's extremely watertight. I know a guy who uses that stuff for plywood aquariums, so I can spray water in here like with a hose, and water's not going to leak out because this stuff is so strong. And that's where the white coloration comes from, the Kills Primer. I don't know how many coats I use of that. I think it was like, I want to say 2 coats. I let it dry, and I did another coat. I used the white, and then there was like this clear version that I used as well to make sure this enclosure was watertight. You don't need the white. The white was actually a mistake. It's usually clear. So, yeah. And you coat that. You coat the inside. You don't need to coat the outside too. You coat the inside, and it makes the wood watertight, so it doesn't break apart and mold. And then the outside enclosure, the outside you can paint pretty much any color you want. It's just for aesthetic appeal. Another comment about the door. I've seen quite a few tegu videos before I made my enclosure, and I did a lot of research. Looked on forums and whatnot, and one of the things I noticed some people will do is they'll skimp out on their enclosures, which you don't want to do. Basically, the only decisions you have for doors is glass or plexiglass, for the most part, unless there's some material out there I'm completely unaware of. Those are the 2 things you want to use. Don't use screen, because it's not going to hold humidity and your tegu's probably going to rip through it. I would suggest to use glass. The reason being is plexiglass. Tegus do tend to scratch on the door, and they're very strong, very powerful animals. If they constantly scratch on a plexiglass door, it can give it this foggy effect, and it can be hard to see inside the enclosure. Glass is a bit more durable. It's heavier and a bit more to work with, but it's more durable than plexiglass. So I'd recommend that. As far as materials for enclosure is concerned, plywood and 2x4s is pretty standard. Some people use melamine. I was recommended against melamine because basically the seams, it doesn't hold the seams real well. When you do the enclosure, you have to put silicone on the edges, and I don't know if you can see like this. There you go, the silicone. But you got to silicone the edges and make sure it's watertight. You got to silicone all the way around. And basically melamine doesn't quite hold, because of the material, it doesn't quite hold well. So, and then you have to re-seam the enclosures after like a year or so, or a couple of years, and you don't want to do that. So plywood is probably your best option. But I've seen melamine enclosures too, so it's up to you what you want to do. What else? The enclosure itself is on wheels, because my room is in the basement and it floods, and I wanted it to be higher up, so if water gets in here, and it has, and it does, basically the enclosure doesn't get swamped with water. And then you can see the vents. I have one on this side and one over there, and that's to allow airflow to go in. What else? Oh, the inside of the enclosure. The little probe, I have a little humidity probe, temperature humidity probe that I got from like the garden store. It was really cheap. The bulbs, I can't really describe how to put the bulbs together because it's not too complex. It's just hard for me to describe it without actually showing you. That unit right there, minus the bulb, this part right here, some people can buy this all put together just like it is right here, where it has everything you need. You just gotta plug it in. But my Home Depot and Lowe's suck because they never have anything, so I had to build it myself. It's not hard to do. If you really want to know how to do it, send me a message and I can give you links and stuff to show you how it's done. It's not that difficult, but I can't really show you on the video. But I have two of these little fixtures, these housing units, one housing the mercury vapor bulb, and other housing the halogen, which keeps the temperature on the hot spot like between 100 and 110. So yeah. The branches I all got from outside. I soaked them for like a week in a big trash can, like a trash can, and I used a light Clorox solution, which might be why they're a little bleached, but it kills any insects. I still get insects in here, probably from the mulch. This is cypress mulch, which is highly recommended. Almost everybody recommends cypress mulch. Because it's just widely available. For some reason, it's not widely available on the West Coast, but if you're in the East Coast, you can go to pretty much any garden store and find this stuff, so it shouldn't be, like, too difficult to find. But yeah, these are the cypress mulch, and there's about 10 inches in here. I was supposed to fill this whole lip up with cypress mulch, so I never got around to it. But she can completely bury herself in this, and that's the most important part. You want to have a deep substrate bed to where she can at least completely cover herself. I think that's a good measurement. And again, I should probably add more mulch in here. But she does completely bury herself in the mulch. Her favorite places to hide is under there, under the mulch. She'll go in there sometimes, and she's currently hiding in there, and she'll block the door with cypress mulch as she's done. The containers, the hiding holes, just bins with holes cut in them. This is like a container. And the basket spot's just a board, and they have rocks there so you can get up. And a random flower pot because it was laying around from my old fish tank, and I decided to just leave it there. And the water dish is just a kitty litter pan, so nothing special there. Let's see. Overall, the cost of the enclosure was around, I'd say, $1,000, and that's including everything. That's including the wood, the probe, the bulbs, the mercury vapor bulb too, the glass, everything together. It was probably around $500. The mulch as well. So not too bad to build an enclosure like this. Wasn't too expensive. It's not hard to do. Oftentimes it looks intimidating, especially if you've never built anything like I have. But it wasn't too difficult, and it actually came out pretty nice and very functional. And it's much better than skimping out, because you don't want to build an enclosure and just getting one of those. I cannot believe people keep adult tegus and what are they called? Oh man, I forget what they're called. But yeah, so don't skip out on the enclosure. Enclosure is very important. And of course, Riley does get free roam time around my room and whatnot. But she's in here most of the time. This is a regulated environment, so she spends most of her time in her enclosure. So try to make it nice. And I think that's about everything. So if you guys have any other questions about the enclosure, you can go ahead and send me a message and I'll answer them the best I can. Alright, that's it.